What did the New York Mets lineup need to catch fire? Apparently, it's losing their MVP. 3 games in a row where they've scored 10 runs. We'll talk about the offensive outburst and if this bullpen is still a problem on today's edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5, get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. But without Francisco Lindor in the lineup this week, the New York Mets have now won 4 games in a row, and they did something this franchise has never done before tonight. They scored 10 runs in their 3rd consecutive game. It has been an unbelievable outburst from this offense, and it really has been everybody chipping in. For weeks, maybe even months, I've been on this show asking Pete Alonso and Brandon Nimmo to step up. Now with Lindor out of the lineup, they are doing just that. You see Mark Vientos chipping in. He has already broken out of what was a slump that was plaguing him from his 2 home run game all the way up until a couple of days ago. You have Jose Iglesias getting 2 hits every single night from the leadoff spot. Luis Acuna continues to contribute on both sides of the ball. It's just been a joy to watch the Mets so far this week. As you can tell, they can taste it. They can see the finish line in sight, and they're trying to run through that tape and make sure that they are playoff bound. This was a great way to start this series against the Phillies. This was going to be the easiest game because you had Taijuan Walker on the mound, and the Mets could not let him just get through and pitch to contact and have balls hit hard in places where there was fielders. They had to hit the ball out of the yard, and that all starts in the 1st inning. Mark Vientos with 2 outs, rips a laser beam, 113 miles per hour off the bat, low launch angle, but somehow gets it out and over the wall in the left field corner to give the Mets their first run. Pete Alonso goes back-to-back with him, hits one out to right center field, 2 completely opposite home runs. For Vientos, a low line drive to left. For Alonso, a towering shot to right center. And the Mets have a 2-0 lead, and honestly, I thought Luis Severino could have held that up the way he was pitching in the first 2 innings. He struck out 3 in the first, did walk Bryce Harper. Then in the 2nd inning, he struck out Nick Castellanos to start things off. Gives up a base hit. I think it was to Alec Boehm. But then he gets a double play ball and gets out of the inning, retiring the side in order. So through 2 innings, Sevy was cruising. The Mets don't score in the bottom of the 2nd. Severino gets the first 2 guys out in the 3rd. But then he gives up a base hit to Kyle Schwarber and then a tank to Trey Turner to tie up the game. The home run ball is one thing that has been plaguing Severino lately, particularly against this Phillies team. He really has had complete command, and it seemed like, for these last 2 starts against Philly, but gives up 2 home runs to Bryce Harper that amount to 3 runs. And then tonight, the 2-run shot was the most costly pitch that he gave up. But overall, still a good start from Sevy. And the Mets lineup just gets it right back, okay? You have the following inning, after Bryce Harper flew out to end the 3rd, 2 batters later for the Mets, they get those 2 runs back. Jose Iglesias, a leadoff single. Then Brandon Nimmo hits his 21st home run of the season, 3rd homer in his last 6 games. Mets jump right back out to a 4-2 lead. Severino gives up another run in the 4th inning. He allowed a walk and a pair of singles that were sandwiching that walk, which allowed 1 run to score. So the Mets are up 4-3 going into the bottom of the 4th. The same inning they scored 9 runs in a night prior. And once again, the 4th inning was very kind to the Mets as they score 5 runs. JD Martinez starts it off, gets hit by a pitch. Tyrone Taylor walks. Francisco Alvarez gets ahead in the count 2-0. He gets one put on a tee from Taijuan Walker up in the zone right down the middle. He was looking for a fastball. He got it. He destroyed it, hit it over 420 feet for his 10th home run of the season. Remember last week I did fun with numbers, talking about some milestones that Mets hitters had to get to for this lineup to do enough to make the playoffs. One of them was Alvarez getting to 10 home runs, and he did it with 9 games to spare. I want to talk about that segment, revisit those fun with numbers milestones, because a lot of them have already come true. So we'll go through that a little bit in the next segment. But for Alvarez, to see him feeling powerful at the plate again, that's a really good sign from this offense where you can have a guy batting 8th, hitting tanks like that. So a great swing by Alvarez there. After his home run, Luis Angel Acuna struck out, but then Jose Iglesias started another rally with an infield single. That pushed Taijuan Walker out of the game. Brandon Nimmo comes up. He rips a double that drives in Iglesias. Mark Vientos follows it up with a base hit to drive in Nimmo. All of a sudden, the Mets are up 9-3, and they could have had even more. Pete Alonso and Jesse Winker each drew walks to load the bases, so it looked like they would get over 10 runs in that inning. But JD Martinez, who continues to struggle, hit into a double play ball, and that ended the threat. Pitching with that huge lead, though, Severino cruised through the next 2 innings, set the side down in order in the 5th and the 6th. Finishing off another quality start, 6 innings pitched, 3 earned runs allowed off 5 hits and 2 walks, and the 1 home run. Struck out 7, was shut down at 86 pitches. Obviously could have gone out there for another inning, but with a commanding lead, Severino needing to go on regular rest against the Braves this week, made sense to have him end his day there on a positive note. Here's where there's a little bit of concern. We're going to talk about this one in the final segment, the Mets bullpen, because it's still the Achilles heel of this team. Danny Young comes on. He had been great until these last couple outings against the Phillies. It's disastrous once again, gives up a leadoff double, then a base hit. Then he hit his 25th batter of the season with a back foot slider. Okay. How many of you believe that he's hit 25 guys with a back foot slider? If you've been watching every game, it feels like it. I didn't actually think it was 25. I wanted to put a crazy number out there. Originally, I was going to say 49, but that's just too insane. I looked it up just to see because I figured it had to be at least in the double digits now. He's only hit 7 batters, but I swear that back foot slider that hits the back foot, it just keeps happening for Danny Young. It's frustrating. That loaded the bases. Young did get an out. It was a ground ball off the bat of Kyle Schwarber. Wasn't hit hard enough to turn 2. He's pulled for the game for Reed Garrett. Garrett comes on, strikes out Trey Turner, but then gives up a double to Bryce Harper that scored 2 inherited runs. Mets only had a 9-6 lead, so it got a little bit dicey. Garrett gets the final out of that inning. Mets come up in the bottom of the 7th and get an insurance run. Tyrone Taylor draws a leadoff walk. This guy needs to stay in the lineup. He has earned the starting center fielder job with the way he's playing lately. So another great game by him. Francisco Alvarez hits a ground ball that the Phillies could not turn 2 on. He beats it out, and Luis Angel Acuna rewards him for that hustle. It's an RBI triple. So once again, it is Luis Angel Acuna that drives in the 10th run. Last 2 nights against the Nationals, the Mets had 9 runs, and Acuna hit a late home run in each of those games to give the Mets that 10th run. He's the one that has created this historic 3-game stretch for the Mets by these late heroics. Here it was that RBI triple. We got to see the speed. Once again, hitting a hard line drive that made it all the way to the wall, and this kid can fly. So another good night from him. Also played some steady shortstop once again. And then the final 2 innings were a little bit easier for the Mets. Ryan Stanek with a scoreless 8th, and Edwin Diaz looking flat out dominant in the 9th as the Mets win by a score of 10-6. Moving forward, can the Mets keep this offense rolling throughout the rest of the series against some tougher pitchers? I want to talk about that in the next segment, as well as going through some of those milestones that we talked about a week ago and your Francisco Lindor update. We'll get to all of that in just a minute. First, though, quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, or it brings home the winning trophy. It's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers to roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. I even have right here, I have a horn that I bought for eBay Motors. I got to install it in my wife's car. I've been slacking on that. Been a little busy, but I got to take that seriously. So maybe I'll do that after I've announced it on the show. Maybe I'll take some time tomorrow to actually put that in her car. But regardless, Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. Over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You always find exactly what you're looking for. With eBay's guaranteed fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need and the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into an MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay's guaranteed fit is only available to U.S. customers. Now, if you were up tonight watching the New York Mets game and you want a post-game reaction show, I will be going live on the Locked On Mets YouTube channel as well as Locked On New York Sports. So make sure you subscribe to both places. Locked On Mets, same thing we've had all year. Goal is to get to 10,000 subscribers by the end of the season. So I appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. Also, though, we have the Locked On New York Sports channel now, which is your home for post-game reaction shows. So tonight, Chris Schubert had his hands full. I don't know if he did both. I haven't checked, but he has to do the Jets post-game show as well as the Mets one. And so I believe he did either a dual stream tonight or he covered one of each. But you can go to Locked On New York Sports, see what Chris did, and he'll be back. I believe he said he's going to do one on Sunday. I don't think he's going to be there for Saturday, but I will give you your Locked On Mets postcast after the game, Mets versus Phillies. So make sure you have that marked in your schedule. After the game, I will be going live on YouTube. Just subscribe to either Locked On Mets or Locked On New York Sports, and you will find that once the game is over. Now let's talk about the offense a little bit here. As great as these last three games have been, what I want to see now is you go up against Christopher Sanchez, a guy who carved you up on Sunday. Formulate a good game plan, watch the tape, see what you guys did wrong, and put a plan into motion and beat up on Christopher Sanchez. Hang some crooked numbers. Show that this lineup can do it against good pitching as well, because the last three games, as awesome as it has been, hasn't necessarily been top flight arms that you've beat up on. A couple of young lefties for the Nationals, rookies that have had good seasons, but guys that you can get to, and then Taijuan Walker, who's just been bad this year. So now going up against Christopher Sanchez, let's see the Mets carry this over. Then it's going to be Ranger Suarez, who hasn't been pitching great lately. So a guy the Mets could jump on, but he also has it in him. We've seen Ranger Suarez in the past just light it up, and he is a really good postseason pitcher, pitches best in these big moments, so I wouldn't count him out. The Mets got to win one of these two games, and ideally you win them both, because, again, it's going to be Zach Wheeler on Sunday, and that's going to be a tall task. If you want to avoid the Phillies clinching the NL East in your ballpark, again, you got to win this series. You got to take 3 games. So we'll see if the Mets can do it, but the offense has to be the driving force here as well as the starting pitching, because I don't trust this Mets bullpen in late game situations covering multiple innings against this Phillies lineup. And again, we'll touch on that in the final segment today. How do the Mets form a playoff bullpen they can trust? And a little spoiler, it's going to have to be some starting pitching that helps them with that. But this lineup has to carry them the distance at this point. 9 games left. We want to see more offensive outbursts. And I'll tell you what, Nostradamus over here, I spoke some stuff into existence last week, not even really thinking about it. That's where I did my fun with numbers segment, where I wanted to talk about some milestones guys could reach that would help the Mets get over the top down the stretch. One of them, as I already mentioned, was Francisco Alvarez getting to 10 home runs. At the time, he had hit 7 on the season. Well, he's got 3 more. He's up to 10. He looks like Alvarez from last year when he got a pitch to hit, or when he gets a pitch to hit. He's not missing it. So that is a really promising sign. Another one was Pete Alonso. I said last week he needs to get his OPS over 800 because he's never finished the season with an OPS below that. He's right back over 800 at 807. I also said he should be able to easily get to 35 home runs and 90 runs driven in. He's currently at 34 home runs and 87 runs driven in after the past week where he's hit 393 with 3 home runs and 7 RBIs. Meanwhile, with Brandon Nimmo, I said he should get his OPS over 750. Well, it was 727 at the time. He's got it up to 743. So he is certainly climbing and climbing in the OPS department, has homered 3 times himself over the past week. Now, my other 3 declarations were I don't know if they were the longest shot ones. Now, in retrospect, it seems like it. I had Mark Vientos needing to get to 30 home runs, hit one tonight, so he's 5 away. Could Vientos hit 5 home runs in 9 games? I'm not going to count him out to do it, so I'll still hold on to that one. I think Vientos can get there. It'll take a surge. It might take another multi-home run game, but you never know what he can do over this final week and a half here. JD Martinez, I said he had to get to 20. That ain't happening. Okay. I just can't see it. He is not swinging a hot bat. So I don't expect him to hit 4 home runs over this final 9-game stretch. If he gets one more, I'd be happy, honestly. Francisco Lindor was not hurt when I did that show. I said he had to get to 35, 30, and 100 because I was still dreaming of an MVP season, and that has been put to rest today. Shohei Ohtani had one of the best games in MLB history against the Marlins, a game where the Dodgers scored 20 runs, and Shohei hit 3 home runs. He stole 2 bases, so he got to 51 home runs and either 51 stolen bases, or I think it was 51-51 already. Yeah, ridiculous. He gets into the 50-50 club. He had, I think, 5 extra base hits, drove in 10 runs, so now he's over 120 runs driven in. As much as I gave my passionate Lindor case when it made some sense too, between the injury and that game from Shohei, yeah, there's no chance. He's the MVP and he deserves it. I wave my white flag, and I don't expect Lindor to get to 30-30. I don't want him to try. I don't want to see him try to steal bases until it's one the Mets desperately need in a playoff game. I just want to see Lindor healthy. That's the only goal that he needs to, or only milestone that the Mets need from him at this point. Just get back on the field as close to yourself as possible. Now, I did want to revisit some of these other ones, though, because Pete Alonso and Brandon Nimmo have stepped up. So I want to see that continue. Alonso's got to keep that OPS over 800. I also want to see him match his career lows in RBIs and home runs. Back in 2021, Pete Alonso hit 37 homers, drove in 94 runs. So can he get to those numbers again? I think he absolutely can. That's 3 more homers. That's 7 more runs driven in. He just did that over the past week. And I still wouldn't even count him out to get to 95 ribbies. And I wouldn't think he'd get to 40, but wouldn't it be crazy if he still got to 40 and 100? He's had 9-game stretches where he would put up numbers like that, 13 RBIs and 6 home runs. It'll take one big game. Pete Alonso would probably need a 2 home run game or a 3 home run game where he drives in 6 or something crazy. But again, we've seen it. He's got a couple lefties coming up against the Phillies. One monstrous Pete Alonso game over the next 2 days would be very much welcome for this team. Another milestone to adjust, and that is Brandon Nimmo. He still has to clear 750 with his OPS. Like I said, it's a couple points shy of it. He's at 743 right now. But I also think a new one to look out for is getting to either 90 runs scored or 90 RBIs. Ideally both, but just get to one or the other. He's sitting at 84 in both departments. Last year, he scored 89 runs. 2022, he scored 102 runs. He's already set a career high by a long shot in RBIs. Last year, his career high was set at 68. He's already passed that at 84. To see Brandon Nimmo drive in 90 runs, that would be really impressive in what would still probably be the worst season of his career when you look at the OPS, the batting average, the on base, even the slug. But in RBI situations, he has improved drastically, and he's got to drive in some more runs down the stretch here, especially if we don't see Lindor much over the next week at least. I feel like we'll see him in the Braves series, and we might still see him in this Phillies series. Today, it was indoor workouts, they said, for Lindor, where he got in the weight room, hoping to make his back feel stronger and better, perform some mobility exercises, Carlos Mendoza said. He played catch yesterday. He still has to do a full go of baseball activities, which, of course, is still swinging the bat in the cage. That's going to be the big test. I don't know if that test comes on Friday. With the way the Mets are playing, I still think they should play this cautious. Give him one more day where you don't fully test that back. Maybe on Saturday. It's a day game, so getting him ready for that might not be easy, but maybe Saturday you kind of work him out with full baseball activities and have him maybe available off the bench. And then on Sunday, Zach Wheeler, Sunday night baseball, potentially a game that could have the Phillies, play or, division title on the line, that might be the game to plug him back in. Then you give him an off day after it, and then he at least has played a game going into that Braves series. That's how I would script it at this point, but we'll see exactly what happens. In the meantime, Acuna has got to play every day here. I don't want to see the Eddie Alvarez, Jose Iglesias middle infield. The fact that you have a couple lefties coming up, that pretty much stops that anyway. So I think you'll see Acuna back out there. The one guy I don't want to see is JD Martinez. My milestone and goal for him is to bench him. I know you want to get him going, and I get that. And there's a couple lefties on the mound, so they probably run him out there. To me, Tyrone Taylor has to play. So my guess is they'll keep JD Martinez at DH. I think Marte's got to play too, but you can have Marte and right. Maybe you give JD the start against Christopher Sanchez. If it looks awful, maybe you go to the Harrison Bader, Tyrone Taylor, Brendan Nimmo defensive first outfield on Saturday, day game after a night game. Give JD another day, and then see what happens. But it's getting to a point here where I'd rather see Starling Marte in the lineup than JD Martinez, and you want to still work Jesse Winker in there against right-handed pitching. So you can DH Winker, have Marte in right, and keep Tyrone Taylor in center. That might be the best version of the Mets right now because JD Martinez just looks lost. So we'll see how they continue to manage that situation. But the bigger concern might just be the Mets bullpen. So that's where we're going to close the show today. What will a playoff bullpen look like, and how will they navigate these last 9 games? I'm going to talk about that and give you another wild card update as well. We'll get to that in just a minute. First, though, another word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Well, we have something a little bit different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and current form of payment. You can cancel anytime. And again, this is for all FanDuel customers. When you bet the $5, you get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV when you have a Google account and a current form of payment, which again, you can cancel anytime. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. If you're an everyday listener to the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me anytime news breaks on the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime. You can also take part in our Locked On Mets signed photo giveaways and get the lineup graphics sent to your phone each day so you know who's in the starting lineup without ever having to go on social media. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find a link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Now, everybody won today, although the Padres did not play. So the Mets gain a half a game there. They are now 2 games back of San Diego for the top wild card spot. Meanwhile, the Braves blew out the Reds by a score of 15-3. The Diamondbacks beat the Brewers in the first game of their 4-game set by a score of 5-1. So everybody now has 9 games left to play. For the Padres, you got 3 against the White Sox this weekend, probably 3 W's. 3 against the Dodgers next week, and then 3 against the Diamondbacks. So they got an interesting close to their season. They're going to make the playoffs, but there's a world where the Dodgers beat up on them, where the Mets can close a little bit of ground, assuming they have a great finish this weekend. Maybe the White Sox steal a game, and then the Mets sort of match them. That would put them in a position where they're still 2 games back. Let's say the Dodgers sweep the Padres. The Mets beat the Mets beat the Braves, in that series. All of a sudden, these 2 teams could be tied up going into that final series of the season. So it's not out of the cards yet for the Mets to host a playoff series. Diamondbacks, meanwhile, have 3 more against the Brewers, and this series taking place in Milwaukee. Then the Giants come into Arizona for 3. We saw this week the Colorado Rockies played spoiler. The Giants are capable of that as well. And then they close their season against the Padres again. So if it's all neck and neck going into that last weekend, those 2 teams are in a serious disadvantage where if one of them beats up on the other one, they can knock that team out of the playoffs. Lastly, of course, you got the Braves, who now head to Miami for a 3-game set. The Marlins, again, just got destroyed by the Dodgers, but they did win one game in that series. So can Miami be a spoiler and get one? I hope so, but you can't count on it. They got Charlie Morton, Max Fried, and Grant Holmes pitching. Grant Holmes, that might be the game they lose. Charlie Morton has also had some starts that haven't been great. So there's a chance here, but you can't count on it. So for the Mets here, the way I look at it, win 2 of the next 3. Win this series against the Phillies, and then you'll at least have a 1-game lead going into that series against the Braves. You beat the Braves in that series, then you all of a sudden have a 2-game lead with the tiebreaker and 3 left to play, where your magic number going into that series against the Brewers would just be 1, and that would be their 90th win if they got there. We've said for a long time, 90 wins get you into the playoffs. I think that's probably the case, but here's the thing. I wouldn't just say, oh, if the Mets go 5-4 in their last 9 games, they're in, because if they go 5-4, but they sweep the Brewers, they, win 2 of these final 3 against the Phillies, but they get swept by the Braves, they won't have the tiebreaker, and that might knock them out, because there is a world where the Padres and the Diamondbacks get to 91 wins, and the Mets having the tiebreaker over those teams would mean nothing. So as much as 90 wins feels like what the Mets have to get to, they have to hold their own for the rest of this series, and then they got to beat the Braves in that series next week. All right, so let's now talk about the bullpen, though, because if there's one thing that would hold the Mets back, probably the bullpen. Edwin Diaz is locked back in. Since he gave up that grand slam to Corbin Carroll, he's pitched 10 innings. He's allowed just 1 run. He struck out 19 and walked just 1. So Edwin looks to be back in prime form, and they are going to rely on him heavily down the stretch and into the playoffs. Jose Butto struck at the side on Monday, so hopefully that was him turning the corner after some rough outings. He should be good to go on Friday. So if David Peterson has a strong start tonight, get you through 6 or 7 innings, Butto could be that bridge, whether it's a 1-inning stint or a 2-inning stint, that leads you to Edwin Diaz if it's a close game. Reed Garrett has given up some inherited runs, but in September, his own line looks great, has not given up an earned run, has allowed just 3 hits and 1 walk with 11 strikeouts. His stuff is back to where it was early in the season. So I trust Reed Garrett right now. Phil Maton, as a Met, has a 2.28 ERA. He's not the most lights out of the Mets relievers, but he is a trusted arm in that bullpen. So I think they have 4 guys that you can relatively trust in Diaz, Garrett, Butto, and Maton. Danny Young, I still think is going to be the Mets lefty in the playoffs, but he has not looked good lately, so don't necessarily trust him, but we have seen him be lights out in the past, so he could be sort of feast or famine in a playoff situation, or even down the stretch here, where he might, on Saturday, let's say, go up against the Phillies and finally put up a 0 where he strikes out Bryce Harper and Kyle Schwarber and has a big inning. And then he might have another outing where it's another rough go for him. I just can't see them rolling with Alex Young over Danny Young, as Danny Young has just been a bigger part of this team. He definitely has better stuff, despite the 25 hit by pitches. No, 7. Remember, it's 7. I don't know how it's not more than 7. I swear he's hit at least 10 ankles this year, but whatever. All right. Now we go through the arms that, again, I don't think the Mets trust. Alex Young being the first one. Huascar Braziban has thrown the ball better, but I'm still not buying it. And then you have Adam Ottavino and Ryan Stanek. So the question is, are those 2 guys going to be in a playoff bullpen? Stanek has 13 strikeouts in his last 7 appearances, and yet I don't trust him. 3.68 ERA during that span. He does have the playoff experience on his side with those years in Houston. I think he's got an inside track, but he might be the one guy, like the last possible guy that's in or out of the bullpen. You then have Adam Ottavino, who over the last 30 games has pitched to a 2.89 ERA, but they don't really trust him. That's a large sample size where he's pitching to a sub-3, and even his last 7 games, it's been really strong. Last 15 games, it's been really strong. He's been consistently solid, and yet he's pitching in low leverage. I think he's probably still part of a playoff bullpen, though. So looking at the relievers, the Mets would include Diaz, Butto, Garrett, Maton, Danny Young. I think those are fairly locked in, Young being the one exception. I think probably Adam Ottavino and Ryan Stanek both make that bullpen too. So that's 7 arms. You get 6 more if you're doing 13 arms, 13 bats. Although the Mets could decide if they want to at some point to carry an extra position player. Sometimes in a wild card, that might be the move because it just gives you some more flexibility. Right now, they have 14 position players, but Eddie Alvarez won't be eligible. So the 14th position player would have to be Brett Baty or DJ Stewart. And I don't know if those guys are going to show enough where that's worth it. Stewart, I guess. Brett Baty didn't play today. So, how many games is he really going to get? Is he going to play Friday, Saturday, and Sunday? And is he going to show enough when the Mets put him on the roster for the playoffs? I just don't know. It is a possibility. With that said, I'm just going to go under the assumption that for the most part, the Mets are going to carry 13 pitchers. So, all the names we listed, that brings you to 7 relievers. Manaea, Severino, Peterson, Quintana, those guys are locked in as your 4 playoff starters if you get there. Paul Blackburn is supposed to be good to go at some point next week. I think he would be part of a playoff bullpen as a bulk reliever. And then you have Kodai Senga, this awesome wild card opener, potential closer. I mean, they can use him different ways. We'll see what they ultimately land on. First, though, he has to go into Syracuse, pitch a strong inning, show that he's healthy. If he does that, though, Kodai Senga is a real wild card for this team. But that would be the group I think they're going to run into war with if they make it into October. It's going to be Diaz, Budo, Garrett, and Maton with Danny Young as your lefty. And then I think you'll probably use Blackburn and Senga, or maybe Blackburn and Quintana as sort of those bulk middle innings guys. One of them could always start or piggyback Senga. It's going to be interesting to see how Carlos Mendoza decides to deploy his pitchers and what strategy the front office comes up with. You might not remember this. Back in 2018, David Stearns did one of the more interesting strategic moves that we've seen in recent playoff memory, where he started Wade Miley in a playoff game just to pull him after the first inning so that the Dodgers would put in their right-handed lineup, and then he changed it on him. Or was the other way around? I think it was Miley who got the start as a opener sort of, but it was just, he's starting. And then they sort of, pulled the rabbit out of their hat and tried to get cute with it. And it didn't work out for them. If I remember correctly, they lost that game 7. I believe it was a game 7. I know they lost the game 7 because they didn't make it to the World Series. I think he did try to pull that in the game 7. Regardless, the Mets will be creative down the stretch for sure. And speaking of that, it has been announced that Tyler McGill will start on Sunday. So it will be Zach Wheeler versus Tyler McGill, pitching matchup of the century. I still think Jose Quintana is going to work his way into that game because he's not going to pitch in the Braves series. So if you don't throw him on Sunday, that's going to be extended rest for him. You want him available to pitch in the Brewers series. So getting him some work on Sunday makes sense. And it also sort of is a primer for the playoffs because Quintana might be used in more 60 pitch spurts instead of 90 pitch spurts, especially if Kodai Senga really is available. So have him do that for a game. If Tyler McGill cruises the first time through the lineup, and then all of a sudden in the 4th inning, he runs into trouble, you throw Reed Garrett out there to put out the fire. And then in the next inning, you go to Quintana, or maybe if Garrett stays on, you go to Quintana the following inning. But that's what I think you do here. I wouldn't use Quintana as a guy that comes in with the bases loaded. I certainly wouldn't do that. But as a piggyback off of McGill on Sunday, just don't be surprised if that happens. Anyway, that's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. Again, I will be going live on both the Locked On Mets YouTube channel and Locked On New York Sports for a postcast right after the game on Friday night. So make sure you tune into that if you're up late. You can also, of course, get that show the next day on your audio feed or on the YouTube channel. So again, subscribe to Locked On Mets. Want to get to 10,000 subscribers by the end of the season. So I appreciate all of you. Help us meet that goal. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen or your first watch every day. Now for your second watch, head over to YouTube and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything in the world of sports. Talking about Locked On Sports today with our local hosts from each team, our league-wide hosts from each league. Find Locked On Sports today streaming 24/7 on YouTube.